Oh yeah, I forgot. People usually like a
Usually a
countdown,
countdown
right?
is ideal, but I don't think it matters at this level. So immediately, you have a couple decisions to make. On certain weeks, you might want to try to pull bigger here and get more value out of opening CDs. But a
Hmm.
week like this with bolstering, definitely not a good idea. There's a couple casters in these packs that are pretty important to make sure that you're not over pulling, and in a lower key it's going to be difficult to get all the interrupts, I'd imagine. So the big thing is that robot, though. That's got a cast that really can't be missed, and if it does get missed, you're probably going to die on a hard key anyway, I'm sure. This week it wouldn't be mattered, but that right there, Rebellious Fist. Pretty long cast, but he usually do it. It's based on his energy pool there. You might see it. If he has no energy, then he tries to recharge instead of cast, so if you interrupt twice in a row, and then he won't do it again for a while. But otherwise, just these dark lashes or something you want to try to help out with. Burden of knowledge as well. It's going to put like a really bad dot on players, so just as much disruption as possible. Bloody K obviously has a lot of tools for that, but otherwise it's on the healer. Not too bad on a Tyrannical week, but you'll notice really high damage intake on fortified weeks here if we don't get good kicks.
Okay.
And then this pack is very straightforward. It's just like one mob that needs to be watched. But this opening hallway is kind of your goals here, are to have like a really, really good time on it, because there's so little going on that it almost feels like, you really want to try to maximize it as hard as you can. One thing
I
that
see.
you might not be aware of is this Mender. The mob is going to put like a buff on itself. And if we dispel that buff, it's actually going to drop an item on the ground that you can pick up. Typically, you can't dispel it yourself, obviously, but typically, whoever picks it up wants to do really good damage with it. Like a tank is a great option, because then you get extra threat from it too. A lot of times, if I pick it up as a healer, I might actually pull threat. That's how much damage it does. But it has 5 stacks, depending on how many stacks the mob uses of it before it's dispelled. But it says even on this key, I don't know if it scales with key level, but it says 16,000 additional arcane damage. So that's pretty crazy. Every time we see that Mender mob, it'll be the same. But now here you got a pretty interesting, relatively big volume pack-wise, but the main thing is just making sure that we get the interrupt on the Rebellious Fist, and then if we were doing a Prideful Key, we want to have that Goliath die first, or very near to first, because he gives so much more count compared to the rest of the group, that if he doesn't
Hmm.
die first, it's going to cause a really bad Prideful split to occur. Otherwise, it's just as much interrupting as possible and get a relatively tough pack. But when we got 2 sets of trees, it looks like everybody's stationary here. It's good.
Yeah.
And you'll see this go off here. Oh, good, he got the kick at the last second. It does a lot of damage with 4 stacks of bolstering, and probably imagine we might have died there. But this boss is pretty easy. I'd say the big thing is just try to keep them together as much as you can to help the group. This boss, it's like really, really straightforward. There's only one mechanic for you, and that's surviving that tank mechanic there. The bird itself that's flying around also does like a frontal kind of 3 spear barrage cleave thingy.
Hmm.
If you get hit by that, it does a lot of damage. The line that connects the two also does damage. If you are in between the 2 mobs, it will put a dot on you, but I can dispel it as a healer. Otherwise, this is probably like one of the easiest fights in the game.
Okay.
There's like a couple bugs people were doing to make it even easier, but I would say as DK, just every time the main boss gets to 100 energy, she's going to do the ability. So just watch when she gets to about 90 energy. Just use get ready to use either a CD or time a Death Strike well coming out of it, and very, very easy fight. It's one that scales pretty hard though on Tyrannical, so the higher you get, the worse it's going to get.
I see. Okay. So it's pretty instant too.
Yeah, you have no real time to react to it. You just need to monitor the energy to know it's about to happen. There has been talk about dodging it, and it does seem like you can, but I've tried so many times now, it just never seems to work, so I don't even bother anymore.
Okay. Which way do you go here? Left or right?
Yeah, so if you want to do the normal route I've been doing, we would go right here, yeah, but
Okay.
whatever you prefer.
Yeah.
And the big thing is not getting the pack on the right. There's a pack of stealth mobs on the right. We want to make sure we don't accidentally get too close to those. If we do have that happen, I have a way to solve the problem, but most of this is just a tyrannical, or a prideful issue, so again, in this key, it won't come into play. These mobs are pretty dangerous, though. These might be the hardest mob type in here. They put a really bad bleed out, so good place to try to flex a little kiting if you can, just because 3 stacks of that bleed, and it lasts a long time, too, so 3 stacks of that bleed is going to really add up, and if we did pull the extra pack, there'd be 5 or 6 stacks of it, so. This mob's kind of a pain. He doesn't really do anything, but he's going to constantly try to run away from melee, so yeah, the death grip obviously comes into play there. I see a couple of those mobs over the next few pulls. Probably like 5 or 6 of them.
Oh, was that one supposed to be pulled with the...
Yeah, you could. You know, again, it's bolstering, so you want to be tempering the possibilities there, but it's a good option. In this here, we have a little bit of a eclectic pack. This Ether Driver is going to actually be one of the more interesting mobs to pay attention to as a tank. It's going to cast this really bad dot on you. It's interruptible, and it's also AMSable. Like, if the cast gets off and you have AMS up, it will not apply this really bad dot to you. But otherwise, it's just the healer's job to dispel it. There'll be a really big pack of these coming up, though. Actually, twice. That we'll have 5 of them, and you'll have to definitely try to AMS there. Now, this pack is interesting because there's 2 Goliaths, which, as we talked about, have the really important interrupts. So if interrupts are not on point, you're going to be in serious trouble in this group, and usually you need all 4 interrupts to go off well, and as you see, we've already messed it up, so we're going to have a couple of those casts go off unless we kill them so quick that it doesn't matter. Yep, here they go. I'm going to Devo. And that was with Devo. We still almost had people die, so that's an easy way to wipe there. With pugs, people don't interrupt properly.
Gotcha.
But this is typically where we'd get our 40% split, as you see, so this would have been a prideful. Not the best pridefuls, some of them in this dungeon, but it's important to get good ones later, so it's not going to happen on the 9, but that would have happened there. And then we go into this pack, and again, we have 3 of these birds, Ether Drivers or Divers, whatever. And then we got this dude freaking jumping all around, so I could blind them. Yeah, so when they put those stacks on you, it's going to be really a high amount of magic damage.
36 stacks.
Yeah, necrotic. That's another thing about some of this trash in here. It's really high volume. So hopefully with non-necrotic weeks it will be a little bit more easy to manage, but this week it's pretty rough. This is looked at as one of the easier dungeons timer-wise, though, if not the easiest. The timer is really generous, and in fact I've had situations where we actually wipe to a boss on Tyrannical and still upgrade the key, that should never be. Like, that's really hard to believe. So it's a really easy timer. As long as you don't die a bunch in the trash, then you got everything you need. We got another mob that's going to be relatively pesky in terms of range. It's going to be the Skirmisher. See it jump away there, but you got the Maldraxxus ability up, so that helps a lot. If we went to the right side, or the left side instead of the right side, we would have seen this mob type, this Skirmisher mob type, way more frequently. But this route only has that one. And now this pack, yeah, this pack is pretty pesky because a lot of times there's like basically 2 different patrols up here. So if you get both of them at the same time, you're pretty much asking for a wipe. But typically, if you get lucky with the timing, it won't be as big of a problem. And there's the interrupt again, good. But sometimes you'll just have both of them sitting up there, and you'll either have to wait or try to really be aggressive.
Yeah. I feel like I struggle a lot on like on threat sometimes. Like this druid's really popping off, I guess, and getting.
Yeah. Well, threat is definitely one of the weaknesses of Blood DK right now, but I was looking at the footage that we have recorded together thus far, and so were others in my guild and stuff, and they were actually really surprised at how much damage you were doing. I think that's the Maldraxxus ability, frankly. It does a lot of damage, so I would just say every time you use that, probably don't use anything else. Like, if you're only worried about threat, that is. Like, use that ability, and then next pack use Dancing Rune Weapon or something like that, just so you have something up for every pack. And here's this big pack of these birds, so I could dispel it, otherwise AMS and interrupts 2 stacks. I'll dispel. There it is. Definitely don't want to combine into that pack. Careful.
Yeah.
Ooh,
We don't want to.
No, no, not with bolstering. That's for sure.
Dang it. Yeah, I got him. Or I'm dead, actually. My thing died.
Yeah, that's a really bad debuff there with necrotic. It makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
We will just get a balance.
There we go.
Good. So anyway, this pack is normally where we'd get prideful, so I try to usually take it a little closer to the ledge. Doesn't matter here, obviously, but you just want to get the pride as close to the next pack as possible because we have to fly across the gap there. But typically this pack is a little bit of a bait because there's only 2 mobs, but the squad leader does this frontal and makes the other mob take so little damage. This could actually be the longest pack on this floor. Usually everybody uses CDs for the previous 2 packs, and then these mobs kind of just get single targeted down, and because one of them's not getting AoE'd, it's like, gets a little messy. But yeah, that crashing strike, you dodge that frontal, and otherwise just deal with the Praetor, same mob that we've been dealing with the whole time. Yeah, typically Prideful would have spawned here. I'd want it to be fought over here near this angel, so we could immediately finish the buff, get it, and fly across, and then take it to this pack, which is definitely the hardest pack in the dungeon. Same thing. It's all the same mobs we fought. It's just a lot more of them. So I would focus dodging the squad leader, interrupting the Ether driver, and yeah, just doing as much offense as you can here. On a fortified week, this is a very scary pull.
Ah, shit, yeah. Oh, at least you've got the Trents to help out.
Yeah, that's part of why I invited 2 druids, because I knew that it would be a lot easier for you to see the dungeon if you weren't constantly trying to worry about necrotic. In terms of bolstering, this is probably the right play. Trying to kill that big one first is obviously going to be an important part of it. That mob makes everything else take less damage, so it's a good thing to do.
That is a big pack. Wow.
Yeah, that's a tough one there. And then right into the hardest boss in the dungeon. This boss is basically a DPS like sprint. If you can do really good damage, the fight gets really easy. But if damage is weak, then it's a really difficult long encounter. Hopefully the group will do good damage. But typically what I like to do with this fight is try to keep each of these on the same spot. Every time it jumps away, it's going to do some mechanics that radiate out from where it was. And I just try to keep them together, so then they're all easily dodgeable from the same spot.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Okay, should be ice blocking that, but he's not going to.
Oops, got hit.
Yeah, so that's the tough part of the fight. But basically, it's going to do that mechanic twice, spawn 2 of those, and then it won't do it again until it casts this recharge here. Now at this point, I would just recommend getting away from the boss because it's going to be really dangerous, and any damage taken here is just wasted. Should just get far away and then dodge it. And then again, every time the Dark Stride goes out, a new person gets a bleed and a new mechanic goes on the ground. So
I see.
I don't know exactly like what the pros might consider the right strategy here, but for me, I like to keep them all coming from one direction, just so you have as little. If they're coming from all 4 directions, it's really difficult to see them and dodge them at the same time.
Makes sense. Like even this is probably too far apart, huh?
I would say it's a little, it could be better, but it's fine on key like this. Like you'll learn, the more you do the dungeon, the easier it'll get for you. And it'll depend on your group too. If you have 3 melee, then obviously you really, you can't stack them up because then people are going to be having to dodge while they fight. But when you have 3 range, then you got free reign to go wherever you want. Long flight here. This is actually a whole minute added to the dungeon because of this flight, so always a little weird. Yeah, that's part of it for sure. So you can actually skip 100% of these next 3 pulls. Depending on the route you do, you might want to, you might not want to. I feel like the second pack is always skip. It's never a good investment in my opinion, but I think for this route we'll get, this route we'll get the first guy and then skip the second and pull the third. This mob has been like nerfed to oblivion. It used to have like 3 or 4 mechanics. Now it like literally just does one thing, and that's this fly up and jump thing. It's kind of weird. I don't know why they did that, but
Yeah, I took the Super Stain Legendary because I felt like I was always losing threat. Or losing threat.
okay. Yeah, that's a good option
So
for threat for
hoping
sure.
that was what was going to help me.
The problem with threat is Super Strain is great for damage, but might not be great for threat, because if you're worried about losing threat on the pole, it's not really going to help at all. It ticks, you know, so. But it's still probably the best option. I don't think there's any other one out there.
Want to skip this group too, you said?
I would pull this at this right, yeah.
Okay.
One thing that you could do here too is that mob on the left will actually just cast that Rebellious Fist. And if we're line of sight of it, we don't actually need to even fight it for a while. So if you feel like it's a difficult pull because of that, you could actually just pull the 2 on the right down the stairs, and that Goliath will literally just sit there casting on nobody for however long you want him to do that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I saw him casting it before.
Yeah, and if you pay attention to the footage afterwards, you'll see that only you and I got hit, because we were the only 2 ones in range of it. The other 3 did not actually get hit by it when the cast went off. And now we'll go around the right here. We skip this pack of 4 angels to get a bigger pull of smaller mobs. These mobs are actually harder than it looks. As Bloody K, it's pretty easy because you can grip them, but if you're ever not tanking or something like that, it could be dangerous. A lot of people quickly run to a pillar and try to line of sight them all, but for me, if I have Gorfiends up, I'll quickly just try to get kind of right where the skull is positioned, let the final 2 pull in, and then Gorfiends them all, and then single grip the longest, like the one that's the furthest away. So let's see if that works out for you. There you go, and then just solo grip one of the other ones, and there you go. So now you basically have them all in a little pile, which is what people are... Oh yeah, I grabbed more trash though. That's gonna be a wipe. But either way, that part was executed perfectly. That's what everybody's trying to accomplish anyway with the line of sighting situation. So you've basically done that just quicker as a Blood DK. Probably best to just swipe now, yeah. We don't want to pull this anyway.
Okay.
Not sure how that happened. Maybe we could take a look later and figure it.
When I looked at, maybe it was me, but I think it was, I don't think the druid spell would have done it.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think it, did you have a pet out?
Yes, could have been.
I think it might have been the pet cut the corner, yeah. Kind of just walked through the pack as we went around it.
Should have exploded. I even thought of that. I'm like, oh, I'll just dismiss it or explode it before I start this next call.
Not 100% sure that happened, but it is something to keep in mind. All of these pulls that we do, and if you skip any of this stuff, the pet will cause complications. So, especially the previous 2 that we pulled, if you do end up skipping those in the future, the pet will run around through them. So, always make sure you either dismiss it or do something, you know, to get rid of it.
So on Blood, I think the pet acts differently than on Unholy. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like a... Unholy pet is like a proper pet with the full AI. The Blood pet is just like a minion, so it just kind of runs around and does whatever it wants. Unholy and Hunter pets, and Warlock pets, they have like a upgraded AI where they're supposed to be smarter and make better decisions like a player would expect them to, but whenever you have a minion, which is like a fire elemental or a DK, Blood DK pet, then they're just kind of going to run around and take the shortest route every time. But anyway, that would have been 80%. We would have taken this to the boss here. And this would have been... Or we could have used it on trash, which we still need. Before we leave here, we need 87%-ish. So that's 2 more pulls. Just something to keep in mind.
Are we going in on the boss now?
Yep, boss next, yep. This boss is very easy, actually. I've discovered a trick thanks to a stream viewer the other day. And if you stand right outside the red targeting reticle on your... like around the boss, you can actually not ever take the tank mechanic. Which is, yeah, I mean, it's good. It's also bad for specific reasons, but it's mostly good because then it allows you never to be in any danger. But it slows down the encounter, the pace of the mechanics, because they're based on his energy, and the tank mechanic removes some of his energy. But typically, I would say on a difficult week, it's worth it. just because you're not going to take any damage at all in this fight then. Now, one thing we already did wrong, though, was we want to try to stack. Yeah, we want to try to stack for that mechanic because it makes it really easy to soak if we do. And as the Blood DK, you can soak really easily with AMS. Oh, you dodges.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll res, but... Yeah, so if they were all stacked up, we'd quickly just drop them and then move immediately, and that would be all you would need. It does look like we... Yeah, looks like we get the res and hopefully salvage it. It looked like we were gonna res, but the guy... Okay, there we go. So now, since they're all spread out, I don't think it's going to be possible for one player to soak them all. I'll help the best I can. I should be able to do it pretty easily, too, as a paladin.
So now they all come to him, and I'm going to try to get them with AMS, right?
Yeah, ideally, you would run through them with AMS. I mean, even if you don't have AMS, I think it's still the play because you're the one who's going to take the least damage from them. And the boss is taking, like, massively increased damage, so everybody else is focusing on their DPS right now. But, yeah, ideally, they would just be all stacked up 100%. And it would be basically... it would basically be done in an instant. You could just release her, actually. It's right next to the boss. And now we need 2 more pulls. So I usually get these usurpers, this big AoE pull that we already fought. And then I usually get the one in the middle because it gives better count. But so I usually grab these and take them around this little pillar here to line of sight them all together, so it's easier to kill them quickly.
Someone they're attacking, so
yeah, unfortunately the group's got to do it too. So for now, it's not a big deal. But I always try to think about like what kind of small mistakes can the group make, and that's one of them. So the way to solve that is, and then we want to get this pack here. The way to solve that is just kind of get out in front of the group and make sure that you're the first person in combat with them, so nobody could accidentally do that on you. And this pack is harder than it looks. It's got another one of those mobs. Got this blessed weapon mechanic, which I can purge and pick up again, but past that, it's a little bit harder than it looks. So I think if you did a prideful and you were a little bit worried about this, instead of using it on the boss, you could use the prideful on this pack. Also has this greater mend here, which we definitely do not want to get off. Does exactly what it sounds. It's a big heal on the mob. So, and that's it. 87.37 is exactly what we want. So we go up now, take the angel, and fight the 3 hardest mobs in the dungeon. Unfortified, these mobs are a real test every week, because I don't know if you were aware of this, but like when you kill one, it buffs the other 2 with an ability that the first one had. So I prefer to go left to right because the first ability on the left is actually completely dodgeable, 100% dodgeable. But a lot of people don't like dodging it. It's a big DPS loss, they say, so that'll be up to you and maybe your group, but for me, I always like left to right, and then that third one is going to have all the mechanics. So usually, if it was a tough fort week, we'd probably pop Lust and CDs there. I think typically if you use CDs on this first one, it should be back up again for the third one, unless it's a really easy key, time-wise. But that spear that comes out, you could tell where it's going to projectile based on the direction it's facing. So you see like kind of the angle it's shooting is going to be the way it's facing. And yeah, and then if 4 things come out in like the cardinal directions there. And it's just position yourself ahead of time to dodge them and makes the group have a lot less stress. But also if it puts it underneath you, you can get knocked back from it. I think you just saw that. And one tip I will give you, if you are near the edge of the platform when that happens and you get knocked off, you can fall off the platform and wipe, basically deplete the key because it's like a 5-minute fall and a 5-minute respawn.
Jeez.
Had that happen a couple weeks ago, actually. And then that diminuendo is actually a front. Yeah, it's same deal. So just make sure you're, cognizant of the... But any of the spears from the previous mob do not continue to pulsate. But this one is also going to do a frontal there, so you want to make sure you're dodging that frontal.
Oh, gotcha.
And I guess also making sure you're not hitting the group with the frontal. Typically, the group should dodge stuff like that, but it's kind of also the tank's job to give them the least mechanical effort that they need.
I see. Okay. I'm
Yeah, so
getting
you
it now.
got knocked back by the mechanic, and then the frontal comes, so a little bit bad timing there. But okay, so anyway, this mob is the hardest of the three. Now that it's buffed, I have an item that I have access to as a Hyrian player that I'm going to do to stun the mob and make it take way more damage here for a few seconds. So
What you're doing right now? Is that the
yeah,
circle?
it's stunned for 2 or 3 more seconds. There we go. So now we've
Oh,
resumed.
I was
And
just. I saw a circle. I'm like, okay, get out of that.
it looks like it, yeah.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's just the same mechanics plus these 2 stacking things. Damage over time and damage taken increased, which they had recently nerfed, so it's a lot easier than it used to be at least. And then this would be the final prideful, and we take it into the boss.
Accept your defeat, Archon. The age
And
of
this boss has also got a small maximization you can do. The shield is such an important part of it that you always want to try to be positioned near it whenever it comes out, so players have way less movement to make, and also you yourself have less movement. But you could also try to position your group and your players near the edges, so when she does the run through, it doesn't actually go anywhere. A little bit harder to pull off, but I've seen it work pretty well. And obviously it's a huge uptime gain if you're playing with multiple melee. But this fight is actually a lot harder than it looks for the tank perspective. She hits pretty hard when she's actually attacking, and the damage it does on higher tyrannical keys gets pretty wild. But now quickly we want to spread out and grab one of each of these orbs. There's going to be 5 orbs, and we need to get them into the center console immediately. And then once all 5 orbs are taken into the console, somebody needs to pick up the spear and throw it at the boss. I kind of feel like this is usually on the tank just because, you know, they're kind of the unwritten leader of the group,
no.
but
Did I miss her? Oh, okay, good. I think I got her.
good. Yeah,
I
sometimes
thought I
it can
missed
look
her.
like you miss, but for the most part, if you just
Looked
wait,
like I missed that. Wait for what? Sorry.
if you just wait for her to move, it will be like guaranteed that. There's a lot of times she'll move during your throw, and that's obviously making it harder, but
She can be in the circle too, right?
yeah, I had somebody try to convince me that that's not the case, but I don't see any evidence that it is, because especially if you look at the debuff while she's in it, it says specifically reduce damage from the ability itself, not all things, so I don't think that's actually a problem.
Used my.
I will strike you down.
I use Imprint Blood on when she's not hitting me.
Mm.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I'll just like keep popping, you know, cooldowns. I need to get better at when I press them.
Yeah,
You know?
cooldown timing. That's the key for Blood, man, honestly. Like, the more you play, the easier it'll get, so just, it's all about practice, really.
Be gone from this place.
And it's just, again, 5 orbs, get them in the phase, and this should be it. Typically, we would have lost that previous phase, but we're killing everything so fast that it's not really happening.
Okay. Wait for her to stop, you said?
Yeah, just wait for her to move, and then right after that movement, you're good to throw for a good 10 seconds. Perfect.
Oh, good.
Cool. That's that. As you see, very lenient timer. An easy
Oh, yeah.
double upgrade.
Wow.
I will strike.
And that was with a full wipe on trash, too, don't forget, so.
Yeah, I feel like just these few times we played together, I've gotten like
The path.
so much better.
Yeah,
Crazy.
absolutely. I mean, it's everything, I think,
needed-
like... Go ahead.
Yeah, I need someone to like teach me like what, because I've watched tons of videos on these dungeons, but they don't tell you about like, you know, the different trash mechanics and different little tips on the bosses and prideful and things like that. So this has been super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what they should be doing, right? Like, if you're trying to make a guide, you have to make it from the ground up, but a lot of people just go over the macro level mechanics, whereas as a tank, you need to know a lot more than that. I think they're always focused on what DPS need to know, but yeah, this dungeon is actually, this is one to get really good at, because there's a lot of nice little tricks as Blood DK, and once you see what the Prideful can do in here, it's going to be really powerful.